Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, where you're going to learn why public opinion is the most important form of news right now. Now, I'd like everybody to buckle up because we have a lot of really big things to talk about today. The number one topic is a new horrifying record for election fraud polling. Numbers so big we've never seen them before. But first, I want to give you a quick lesson to catch everybody up to speed on why our reporting is so important. We've been attacked many times for it, but over the last few years, we've developed quite an impressive list of questions that we will ask, and no other pollster will. Now, we poll on the normal stuff like elections and the economy and public opinion about holidays. But then there's stuff like Trump's agenda pieces, like our recent polling that shows that deporting all illegal aliens is more popular than amnesty. Things like Biden's dementia. Just this week, we showed that 57% of voters think that it's true that Biden is getting increasingly less mentally sharp. Things like LGBT backlash, which you can check out in our story yesterday. And if you want to read it without going through the hassle of subscribing as a reader on RasmussenReports.com, now our Twitter subscriptions are live. So all you have to do is go click a few buttons and you can read that for yourself. Then there's things like the weaponization of government. Don't forget, a majority of US likely voters think the FBI is acting as Joe Biden's personal Gestapo. And last but not least, we can't forget the important topics of election integrity and COVID vaccine safety, where we are truly and utterly alone. Now, all of the vaccine polling has turned up some very uncomfortable things. Just a few from our vaccine safety polling. 7% of vaccinated Americans say they had a major side effect out of their own mouths. Just as many people say that someone in their family died from the COVID vaccine as the COVID virus. It was like 11% for the virus, 10% for the vaccine. Nearly half of Americans think that the COVID vaccines are causing a significant number of unexplained deaths. And then there's our most recent one. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans know someone personally that they say died from the COVID vaccine side effects. And for YouTube, we're just reporting on what people said. We're not making any inferences here. But this has all been reported over the last 2 years. But just yesterday, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we got an absolute hornet's nest of Twitter trolls attacking us for a whole bunch of reasons, all because of one tweet, this one here, which, by the way, we continue to stand by. But why are we alone? And why do they attack us so much? Well, first I want to clear up, it isn't an issue about money. It only costs, a couple $1,000s max to do a US national likely voter poll. And there is so much money in polling, especially progressive polling. Like, look at Morning Consult that for years surveyed thousands of people a week just to track vaccination rates. It must have cost them tens of millions of dollars. All of our polling for our entire history hasn't cost that much money. Second, we're attacked for being inaccurate, which, over and over again, we've been proven to be accurate. And I'll put this graphic up here for people who haven't seen it yet. But just in the last 2 presidential cycles, even our polling, really tracked with the final reported popular vote margins. But third, then people say, well, it's because we're giving voice to these topics and that we're fueling people's opinions. And that one is just flat out wrong. It's pretty flattering to think that we have that much influence, but I can tell you firsthand, our viewership isn't that high. We have an incredibly small footprint. But when they say that, they show us that they absolutely don't understand the role of public opinion in our discourse. Public opinion isn't used, the reporting, to sway the masses. It should be used by decision makers and politicians to guide their actions. And the fact that we report on it to you just means that you're getting an inside view of what your politicians know. You're part of a very small group of educated people who understand that public opinion is important. It's actually incredibly important if you want to do things like prevent civil wars. And our polling has shown that in the last 20 years, Americans think that a civil war is more likely now than it's been in decades. And that's a pretty troubling thought. Maybe it's because people don't understand public opinion, or maybe it's just because they have reasons to ignore it. But fourth, somehow it's just us being conspiracy theorists. If only we had read a scientific paper or two, then we wouldn't be so misguided. We'd stop being anti science troglodytes and learn to love the mass forced mRNA vaccine experiments. First, I'd like to say that I'm a qualified Navy nuclear engineer with a master's in engineering. Plus, I worked as a venture investor in hard sciences where I read hundreds of scientific papers and patents. And finally, I have an Ivy League MBA, which I'm not actually too proud of, but it doesn't matter at all. One iota, what we think, it matters what the public thinks. And as long as the public thinks that the vaccines are unsafe or elections are insecure, we're going to keep polling on it. And we ask everyone else to poll these topics with us. And I'd also add that almost every one of these vaccine questions isn't about, well, what did you hear on the news? It's about people's personal experiences. Do you have a side effect? Did someone in your family die? It's just not the kind of thing that can be swayed from reading one Rasmussen report's headline. But to boil it down, like, here's what is going on versus here is what should be going on. And this is the con being played upon you. What should happen is that people in pharma should say, wow, a lot of people mistrust us, and that's going to hurt our business. So maybe we should be more transparent or do better studies so that we can convince people that these vaccines aren't unsafe. Or maybe the government should say, wow, people don't trust us anymore. Maybe we failed in our role as regulators and we should get more aggressive. Or maybe people in the media should say, wow, this is the biggest story potentially in decades. Maybe millions of people died by taking a pharmaceutical product. Maybe, just maybe, the justice system and the federal government and government law enforcement agencies should come down on these people like the hand of God. Maybe that's what should be happening, but here's what is happening. Do you remember Obamacare? Yeah, I know. Seems like a million years ago. How a lot of people hated it and wanted it repealed, especially the individual mandate. Well, they did not repeal it, and a majority of voters' concerns were just overlooked. And in time, they actually went away. That has happened many times over and over again. And I think that's what people were expecting to happen now. They think that if they ignore or gaslight you or vilify people who raise these concerns, that problems with the 2020 election and the COVID vaccine and everything they did to keep Trump out of office will just disappear. My guess is they're doing too much too fast. They push too hard. They're going to need new tactics to stay on top. But in any case, we're extremely happy to be one of the ragtag few holding out to keep people's eyes open to the need to address ever increasing voter concerns about these issues. But now that we addressed all that, thanks for sticking with us. Here's the topic we're going to talk about today: election fraud. There is no way Joe Biden got 81 million votes in the 2020 election. Do you agree or disagree? So this is actually a refresh of a question set we did over a year ago, when that Top of the Billboard song came out about the election. And believe it or not, the numbers haven't changed at all. It's not going away. 34% of Americans strongly agree with that statement. Another 14% somewhat agree, for a combined total of 48%, or nearly half of the electorate, and a plurality, because only 35% strongly disagree, another 9% somewhat, for a combined total of 44%. So 48% to 44%, Americans think there's no way Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And now a look at the party numbers. And of course, Republicans agree with that. I think that's 76%. 19% disagree. Only 11% strongly disagree. And independents are relatively split on this. But look at Democrats. Even 25% of Democrats, 1 in 4, at least somewhat agree with that statement. 15% strongly. And that 15% is about the number of Democrats that routinely cross over to vote Trump. But only 57% of Democrats strongly disagree that there's no way Joe Biden got 81 million votes. But here's what should be most horrifying for the Biden campaign. The at least somewhat signal is biggest among 18 to 39-year-olds. In fact, they get to 50% with only 27% strongly disagreeing, another 14% somewhat. So that's 41% disagreeing. So 50% to 41%, pretty big margin of 18 to 39-year-olds disagreeing that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And if you've been following us, this tracks with an increasing cynicism among the younger voters. A year ago, I would have said that the biggest backlash against Biden was among the 40 to 64-year-old people or middle-aged voters. That's no longer the case. In fact, 2 months ago, we did a video where we clearly showed that Joe Biden has lost the 18 to 39-year-old vote. And we put up this chart, which shows the trend incredibly clearly. And now, just today, you'll see this Axios reporting where they finally catch up to where Rasmussen reports was 2 months ago. So now, while you're here, please subscribe to our channel if you want this kind of, prescient thinking. But here's the big question. How concerned are you that the outcome of the 2024 presidential election will be affected by cheating? When we started asking this kind of question about the upcoming election, the numbers 2 years ago actually started in the high 40s, but now they're at 66%. 40% of likely voters are very concerned, another 20% somewhat, for a combined total of 66%, or 2 out of 3 voters. Only 14% are not at all concerned that our elections are affected by cheating. I mean, I guess it looks like the most secure election in history shtick didn't work at all. Or Republican secretaries of state torpedoing swing state investigations. Looked like that didn't work at all. The unsubstantiative audits didn't work at all. Voters have an ever-increasing concern about the safety of elections in America, and the ruling class has not addressed it one iota. But here are the party numbers, and believe it or not, the reason the numbers are so high now, higher than they've ever been, is because Democrats are starting to catch up with everybody else. So this number for Republicans is now 83%, a really high number. 56% of them are very concerned. Only 5% of Republicans are not at all concerned about election integrity in the upcoming election. And independents do look like they poll closer to Democrats than Republicans. But again, that's only because the Democrats are just catching up. It's 58% for independents, 36% are very concerned, only 17% not at all concerned. But for Democrats, it's 55%. More Democrats are very concerned about election integrity for 2024 than not at all concerned, just 21%. But here's a really special treat, and we have a new question we've never asked before. It's probably not the best question, but I think it shows something important nonetheless. How likely is it that many electronic voting machines are connected to the internet during elections? 21% of Americans say very likely, almost as much as the 23% who say not at all likely. Another 23% say somewhat, for a combined total of 44%. And the not likelies are 45%. So basically, US likely voters are split on this, although there is a 20% not sure number, which is why none of these got to a majority. But why is this question important? Well, electronic voting machines are becoming ubiquitous, and they're not supposed to be connected to the internet during elections. Although if you're following some of the swing state investigations, you may be excused for thinking that it is possible. So now, as all of our elections become more and more electronic, people are going to have concerns. And here's the level of concern about a pretty benignly worded question. What isn't connected to the internet nowadays? But here are the party numbers, and Republicans overwhelmingly stand out here. 37% say it's very likely, another 26% somewhat. So that's a combined total of 63%, a pretty big number. Only 9% say not at all likely. And independents, just like the previous number, are neck and neck with Democrats. So that's 35% of both independents and Democrats saying that it's at least somewhat likely, and only 30% of independents, 31% of Democrats saying it's not at all likely. Pretty fascinating stuff. And we're going to figure out, I think, better questions to ask about the machines and also about elections in general. I've got some early data back from our venture into the swing state of Arizona, and it looks like a pretty significant number of people got more than one mail-in ballot at their address. That's a problem. Now, sorry this video has been so long, but I basically put most of the takeaways up front. Americans have no faith in the electoral system, and the concerns are only getting worse. It's the same for the vaccines, the same for the justice system, the same for the media, the same for the border, and the same even for our key federal agencies. My conclusion is that people, potentially for the first time, have started to tie all of those problems together and have leveled their sights on the marriage of corporations and the federal deep state. And it appears that more voters think that Donald Trump is the solution to that problem than the number of voters who think Biden is. And that's why Trump is winning in a way that's causing so much desperation in corporate newsrooms all over America. But just a reminder, though, you'll see it here first. So please like the video on YouTube or Rumble. Subscribe if you haven't already. For the first time, like I said, subscriptions are available at Twitter. And also, I started posting on my personal account at Mark_R_Mitchell. So hit me up with a follow. And thanks for watching.